time of it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken, January 2017, 2018, and then after that 2019, then November 2019, and then when Mahsa Amini was killed. It's the continuation of the protests with which the different generation are just joining this movement. The people are trying hard to topple this regime. And it's not easy, because we are talking about the religious dictatorship, which they think they have their order from the God, and they are okay to kill as much as they can to keep themselves in power. And in this case, everything we are hearing about the economy, about everything, it's just the sideshow. The main thing is that all these protests, we had the main chant is death to dictator. It's the main chant. It have been for last 25 years up to now, which I remember. It was probably more than 100 of protests, the big protests and small protests. But the case is the Iranian people alone cannot do it. They need help, definitely. They need help because our country is under occupation. When the French people, maybe they can understand us when they were under occupation of Germany during the World War II. We have some people who are in power, which their language is not Persian, their heroes are not Persian, their history is not Persian. They are everything about the Muslims who just attacked Iran 1400 years ago. We are under this occupation. And right now, the new generation, we just realized that we should come out of this hole. The people in Iran, they are rejecting Islam. Have you heard more than 700 mosques during these protests have been burned? The Qurans have been burned because the new generation, they started to teach the older generation that the main problem is Islam in power in our country. We should get rid of that. And we need definitely help. During the 12 days war, Israel have done an amazing job. United States joined that job with the B-2 bombers, and they should continue that path to make sure they can weaken the regime as much as possible. Then we need trained militia inside the country. We cannot just have some dreams that, oh yeah, the people go to street, do protest, and the regime
Amir,
will come out.
I appreciate that, but I want to kind of steer the conversation to, keeping it to within certain recent developments.
Okay.
Because otherwise we can get into the weeds. No, look, I appreciate what you're saying. If you can sort of summarize your essence of what you're saying, because I do want to get to Yehuda, who I promised was next.
Can you?
Are you there?
Yeah. Are you talking to me? Okay. Yeah. Can I just finish it? Just because I wanted to add one more thing.
Briefly, please. Yes, briefly.
It's about the Ozzy mentioned about the 1979 that it was a revolution that everybody came out. It was not. We should just look at the misinformation. It was the Russians have been involved a lot in that case, and Russia didn't want Iran to be ally of United States. That was the reason they have been planning for that. I'm not calling it Islamic Revolution in 1970. That was a Russian coup d'etat. We have all the element about that. I'm sure we don't have time right now to talk about it. But in my book, Comrade Ayatollah, I put all the facts and documents there that even Iranian.
Yeah, but it wasn't Amir.
I'm going to interject.
Amir, Piotr, can I pinpoint something?
Yes.
Just quickly. The point you're talking about. Any international involvement happens in most coup d'etat or most political change. The difference is that if you look at pictures from that revolution, if you look at pictures from the situation on the ground back then, and who was leading, who was coming up with idea, who was discussing what they were bringing up, there was a cohesive network of opposition that was changing the narrative, that was pushing from a certain age group, and that's something that a lot of recent movements have lacked. I can give the example of the 2019 movement in Lebanon that was taken over. I can give the example of the first Syrian uprising that was just a normal civilian uprising that led to the civil war. The same situation is happening right now in Iran. And as he talked about this a bit, today the youth, they want change. It's just they haven't yet created the structure that would allow them to have decent or positive change on the medium long term, because they don't have that experience, and it requires an older generation that's able to provide this structure. Today, Reza Pahlavi is trying to do that. Other groups are also trying to do that in the Kurds and Baluch region. And I know that a third type of group are also trying to do it inside of Iran on the Iranian level. It's just the issue is that those people are not yet aligned. And the moment those people get aligned, you have a better chance at beating a regime that's so coordinated, that's so structured, that have built 40 years of very, very big technological advances compared to the others. And that's when the mix of all generation going to the street would push people to defect, would push people because they would see hope and potential in a new model, and they would know that they are not sacrificing their position, their expertise, what they are doing for something that will most probably fail. And that's I think a feeling I got from two or three people I talked to that either have family in Iran or were in Iran very recently and then left. Some of them are also close to the regime. That's what they are telling me. Telling not me, but telling people in general. You cannot change the regime until you have an alternative that is working. And I think the US are waiting for this too, or they're trying to build it. They are trying to build that alternative that will be sustainable, that will be present on the long term to provide the US with what they want, because at the end of the day, they're going to spend a lot of money to do this, but also to provide the Iranian with an opportunity for their long term presence in the US side of the ledger when it comes to world politics. So those are a bit of the calculations that are happening right now, and this is why we need a cohesion between all the generation in those protests to create a program that could last longer. Let's say this.
Yeah, thanks for that, James. I think that's
Peter, before Yehuda, may I just respond to some of these Amir's points quick, because I know like what he says, and
No,
I
I
know
promised
about like.
Yehuda would go next because he
Okay,
was
sorry,
spoken
Yehuda.
over, and then it
If
was
you want to, yeah,
okay.
I
All
mean,
right,
yeah, if you want,
he
yeah,
is
roll with
successful.
it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yehuda, I
Warren,
apologize so
go
much to
ahead,
you. I
Warren.
know
We'll
your
go to
time is
Warren.
limited, but
Yeah, we'll go to
okay,
Warren,
thank you.
Yehuda, and then Fahad, who's been
Yeah,
waiting
yeah.
patiently.
Thank you so much, Yehuda. So, first of all, I just want to point out that, Amir's points on some of these things are actually accurate, but about like when he says the Russian, coup, I think that was like more like the leftist governments in the United States and France and Britain just had this like, mistake to actually bring Khomeini to the have like a stone against communism. But I think Amir's point, it's more based about one of like the Comrade Ayatollah book, which he even didn't have any evidence to say like Ayatollah went to the Moscow by boat and then he came back, and like it was based on no evidence. And then about the movement. So like the first movement that happened to overthrow the regime was like 2018 January, when they said that we want to overthrow the regime. And like in 1999, it was actually a students movement which they wanted to, they started to disbelieving in regime, which Amir still in that movement even didn't get arrested, which was debunked also. As a person, I watch his content for many years, I say that. And another thing that I want to say is actually when the Mass Amini process happened, so like still it was a not kind of a revolution, because we saw that like that was like kind of a huge wave which the regime, like because of the international because many international outlets actually cared about that because of it was a social movement, yes. But actually, I think Amir's like trying to, make accurate points, but sometimes his mistake is to just he's putting, tons of misinformation to make his points less credible. If I want to actually make these points, for example, to respond to Ozzy, so I say that, okay, that was a movement which was by the Islamists or Marxists, and like it was MEK, the guerrilla fighters, and the Islamists, which in 79 they were actually united, and they were like in camps in Iraq and in Gaza, and they were training for months to know how to fight like a partisan, and then partisan fighting, and then they went to the streets, and Shah was too nice to them to actually let them do that. And when Amir says, for example, his evidence is that Farah Pahlavi, like Empress Farah Pahlavi, was a comrade and a friend to Russia, and then like that's his point. He has a full document. This is like comrade queen. So his points are actually kind of really irrelevant to what he says, and actually just pointless. So that's like non-evidential, and just saying something, just like bring one accurate point and bring like 95% misinformation to that a little bit accurate point. So that's how you make like all of these documents that bring these points about the Russian coup d'etat. So if you want to make these accurate points here and say that the Islamic Revolution or the Islamic coup d'etat, which I say it was a coup d'etat, so you can bring more accurate points. But because of your personal bias, I think you're bringing wrong points. Sorry, Amir. I was a fan of you for a very long time, but unfortunately.
Okay. I don't want it to sort of become too much of a bilateral dynamic, because, personally, look, I staunchly not... The Soviets didn't think that they had much say once it became clear that the lead figure was Khomeini. They were basically like, well, we can't do much here, because not only was he very anti-Western, he was also very anti-communist. And the Russians, as much as they were keen to see the end of Western influence in the form of the Shah, they weren't able to really leverage this new form of, I don't know, theocracy, clerics, and so on. So I might not be an expert of Iranian history, but I know the Soviet quite well, and it was definitely not a USSR orchestrated coup.
Yeah, Theodore, we got another security alert. We got another security alert from the embassy in Kuwait. The U.S. Embassy is closely monitoring regional tensions. We remain committed to providing timely information updates as the situation evolves. U.S. Embassy Kuwait staffing operation remains unchanged. Out of abundance of caution, the U.S. Embassy has advised its personnel to exercise increased vigilance and has instructed mission personnel to comply with a temporary halt to movement into facilities at Camp Everchon, Camp Buring, Al Salim Air Base, and Camp Patriot. Those are all U.S. military bases in Kuwait. Access to those facilities is limited to essential personnel only at this time. We urge U.S. citizens in Kuwait to exercise increased vigilance and personal security awareness. That's just a U.S. Embassy award for Kuwait.
Fair, thanks. I do also want to draw one quick attention. There's a great account called Geo Confirmed, which works to actually pinpoint exactly when you see, because there's a lot of OSINT BS now, accounts that just jump on the bandwagon because it's a way to make a quick buck. But basically they'll be like, hey, there's this thing happening in this location, but they don't offer any actual geo coordinates. And this account, Geo Confirmed, does a great job of actually pinpointing exactly where that sort of thing has actually happened, and calling out accounts that are, just quote tweeting, but without actually providing the information. So the ones that genuinely, like one of them did it with open source Intel, who is, a legit account, but he made a mistake, and he's written under the tweet, thanks for bringing the attention, and he's deleted his tweet. So be careful where you consume the information, just, heads up as always. But anyway, apart from that, Whale, we've got you on stage. Fahad, we're going to go to you, and then I do want to go to Wales. So Fahad, thanks.
Don't forget about me.
Oh, Christ, damn it. I almost did. Go ahead, Yehuda.
I wish you did.
Oh, wow. That's kind of harsh. All right. You know what? Why don't you go with your Persian fans for now, and I'll wait out.
Okay.
I'm interested. Yeah, I'm interested in their. Yeah,
okay.
I'd like to hear
I want to hear from Yehuda, honestly. I think he has good takes.
Okay, let's go. Let's go to Fahad, Yehuda, and then Whale.
Good afternoon, Mario. Good afternoon, friends. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of touch base on what is currently happening and what we saw over the past week, in which terms of, we saw Iranian people in the streets of Tehran and other cities uprising against the regime in terms of, because of not only corruption, the loss of value in terms of the currency in Iran, and because of how much the regime has made the lives of everyone in Iran very unstable and unlivable, to the point where people decided to uprise once again and take to the streets. And this time we saw, just like any other, the regime fought back with weapons, with live ammunition, and many other tactics, including turning off the internet, which it's been about more than 4 or 5 days now that the internet has been cut off entirely, which means that people inside Iran are not able to communicate with those outside and to share what is going on, or to even stay in contact with their loved ones, which I believe is not only a war crime, but is a sign of what the regime is doing in darkness, is killing more people day to day. I'm part of multiple groups that have launched a campaign to call on senators to support the Iranian people and their cry for help, as many Iranians in Iran are asking for outside support from other countries to stop this killing and to stop what is going on, because we know that the regime will not back down and they will not step away from executions and other forms of suppression. And in Iran, there are people that are asking for the US's support and outside support for bringing a stop to what is going on. If anyone would like to support that campaign, I can share it with you, or you can either go and find it on Bay Area for Iran, which is a nonprofit organization that I'm a part of. And there are also other campaigns that I could share with this community for those who are wanting to help us in getting the word out about this campaign. Thank you, Mario, and thank you everyone for continuing to be the voice of the Iranian people. I greatly appreciate it on behalf of myself and on behalf of our community. Thank you.
Thanks for your contribution, and yeah, for anyone, do check out what Fahad has mentioned. Yehuda has just given up by the looks of it, so Whale, over to you.
I came up just to quickly ask Mr. Amir, under what basis does he believe that the 1979 revolution was a Russian coup? I know he said we don't have enough time to talk about it, but I guess a high level explanation. I'm just curious to know what he's basing it on.
As I documented, I'm glad you asked, because I was just under attack, but I don't know who was attacking me with a lot of disinformation and misinformation, even denied that I was in prison. And about my book, I said in the book that Khomeini went with the boat to Soviet Russia. I don't know, the book, Comrade Ayatollah, is 700 pages. And I don't know which part of the book he found such a thing, because it's documented. It's not by me. It's documented that the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow have been training the leaders for at least 150 countries in Middle East, in South America, and in Africa. The first person who just made a conference about that, it was July 1979, when Benjamin Netanyahu, he was very young back then, when he had a conference about that specific training center, spy training center in Moscow at Patrice Lumumba University. And it was 1988 when the American ambassador in Kenya, Smith Hampton, wrote an article for Observer Reporter. And for the first time, it was just 1964 to 1968, current supreme leader of Iran, have been in that training center in Moscow. And the reason we need to know that is right now, everybody are confused. They're saying it was a lot of juicy and sexy offer from United States, from the West to Iran. Why Supreme Leader is not accepting any of those? Why he's that crazy saying US should not come close to us? Because Khamenei is on a mission. Khamenei was supported by Russians, Soviet Russians, to come to power. And after that, as an agent, he has just one mission: to don't let US come and be friend and ally with Iran again. And he's doing his job. We need to know that part if we want to know what is happening exactly in Iran and why he is okay to kill as much as possible the protesters in the street, because he knows Russians, they have his back. During the 12 days of war, Khamenei went to Russian embassy.
So
I guess my
1979.
I guess my question.
When the Soviets. One second, Wale. Let me just say this point. So when the Soviets entered Afghanistan in 1979, you think that the Soviet-installed Khamenei was and the Islamic Republic was on board with that?
No, at that time, no, because when the event happened in 1979, it was a mixture of several facts came together. They had some help. I don't want to go and talk about that part, honestly, but if you want, I can go and open that chapter about Mitrokhin Archive. I don't know if you heard about the book Mitrokhin Archive. It's an archive published by Penguin, the publishing company. It's more than 20,000 secret and top secret documents of KGB about how they infiltrated the countries around, specifically in Iran. They sent the biggest army of their spies to Iran during the occupation of Soviets and British, when they toppled the Iranian king and brought up his son Mohammad Reza Pahlavi to power. And in that book, it's everything. I want you to go and see that book, Mitrokhin Archive, volume 2 and page 171. You will see something very interesting about the choice of Iranian king as the third and last wife, and see it's not Amir Fkhrawer saying that. It's the Mitrokhin Archive. The archive of KGB says that person was recruited by KGB before even knowing the king. KGB had ally inside King's palace. They had a big network inside Iranian King's palace. And with them and the mullahs, the trained mullahs, they could come together for that coup d'etat. But it was the choice was not Khamenei. Khamenei was a young mullah back then. 10 years later, when Khamenei...
So when Anatola Khamenei, when he said the slogan, neither east nor west,
but it was never neither east, because they went to attack American embassy, but Russian embassy was okay there, and it's still okay, and Russia is running the country.
But
why they didn't attack the Soviet embassy?
From my knowledge in Soviet literature, mate, communism was treated as atheistic and incompatible with Islamic governance, and therefore Soviet influence inside Iran was therefore treated with deep suspicion and, animosity. Moreover, the invasion by the Soviets into Afghanistan directly on Iran's eastern flank would not exactly go down well with a brand new installed, whether or not installed by one entity or another, but a new government that is seeking, national security and deterrence on all its borders. So, what you're saying is interesting, but also completely goes against everything that we know about the.
Just think about it. It's a lot of misinformation.
I think
a lot of misinformation in that area.
Look, I think
it
the
was
context.
Quite entertaining for.
It
was quite entertaining for a little while, but I've heard enough. Well, please go ahead. Sorry, there's a double mute. Go ahead.
By the way, the no time has expired now, right?
I'm
Yes, I was about to read that out, actually.
I'm
Yeah,
still
thank you
trying
very
to
much. Just to bring
understand.
it back to more recent news. Just looking here, yeah, the NOTAM issued for Iranian airspace has expired with the air traffic throughout and over the country now able to resume. I'm going to wait to see, information if anyone's got footage of flight radar or anything of flights coming through. But in theory, that's the idea that airlines can now pass through the airspace as usual. But go for it, Will.
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand. All that information, I guess, helps, but I don't get how the 1979 revolution, which started out as a populist revolution, is being called a Russian coup. I'm having a hard time making the connection.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anyway,
Okay. All right.
sorry, that was a little
That's
bit of intellectual entertainment for me. But let's go. You're back with us. Did you want to share your thoughts from ages ago?
Gosh, geez, the ship sailed. I mean, I think what's important to recognize that this isn't an all or none type of situation. It's not, everyone loves the Shah, everyone hates the regime, everyone loves the regime. Iran's a very complicated country, 90 million people, educated. There are people who are, who are ingratiated, who have been ingratiated to the regime, IRGC, big money, construction, telecoms, oil, gas, all controlled by a very select group of people. They have their own circle. But the reality is, the vast majority of Iranians don't have that, they don't have the luxury of being so, they don't benefit from it. So we've seen this for probably the last 15, 20 years, a change in the mood. Many Iranians are quite young. They're not old enough to remember the revolution. They grew up in a regime with, in the beginning, the lack of the internet. Then they got it and they realized the rest of the world is doing a lot better than them. Reminds me of the Soviet Union, Piotr, where the Soviet Union didn't collapse overnight. It was years and years of people who were part of the party system and, who realized that the world isn't some, hedonistic, horrible place where drug addicts live everywhere on the streets in America. And that, in fact, when the push came to shove, a large number of people who were part of the apparatus realized that it's not tenable, it wasn't going to sustain, and that anything else was better than this. And I think that's where we have to, if we're going to try to calculate where the Iranian people are at, is that there has to be a critical mass of people that say, you know what, I might not be a this or that, a monarchist or a Republican or a Kurdish separatist, but the way we're doing it now doesn't make sense. We have a great country, we have a lot of resources, but we're not enjoying the benefits or the fruits of our labor. So how do we change that? And that's the issue. I think the biggest fear I would have as a humanitarian would be, if it does go, push comes to shove, how many innocent Iranians have to die in the streets because the regime doesn't want to let go? Are there people in the regime that will let go? Is decapitating 1,000, 2,000, 500, or 100 of the regime leaders, is that enough to, break the chains? No one knows. And I think we're going to find out quite shortly, right? I mean, it's 2025. I've been hearing it from my Persian friends for 25 years that we're going to get rid of the regime.
Buddy, we had New. I'm not sure if your
2026.
hangover.
I apologize. Yeah.
You're still
You get
suffering
what I
from your
mean.
New Year's hangover.
25 years, right? So the question
Yeah.
is it over? We don't know, but there are two seminal events, as I mentioned earlier. That is the destruction of Iranian air defense and the realization by people who should know better that they're not invincible and they're not even remotely potent. And then the collapse of the currency. I think that is a tipping point. I think people aren't willing to go out and die and risk their lives if they live an okay life, but if they're living a horrible life, I think that means something. Thanks.
No, I think that's very pertinent, mate. I was just teasing you about the hangover thing. I
No,
agree.
I'm fine.
I think that to your point, right? Any big system. I think this is why people, not anyone specifically here or whatever, but like some people can think that sort of geopolitics is a very rapid changing thing, but you can also think about it in decades, right? How long did it take for the Soviet Union ultimately to collapse? Well, upwards of 10 years plus, you began to see the cracks really emerging in the late 70s. And,
Exactly.
it was a culmination of factors. It wasn't one singular shock event. It was the inability to keep up with the economic growth of the United States, the Soviet Union prioritizing military expenditure and expansion of its space capacities at the expense of its own economics, which led to stagnation, deterioration. But then, of course, you had the Afghan war, which, well, the Soviets went in for over 10 years. They achieved absolutely nothing. And that's aside from also talking about just generally the lack of human capital, in investment in sort of the knowledge economy and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, or you could talk about the apartheid case in South Africa, right? That was a long-term project, deliberately done through multiple different pieces of policy, be them sanctions, diplomatic isolation, tariffs or restrictions on certain tech and stuff like that, to force a gradual regime change, which led to the disintegration of the apartheid regime. But none of that was a quick fix. And in the case of Iran, this is a very difficult thing to resolve for many reasons. But one thing I would just highlight in this case is geography. Right. The reason why Venezuela is a country that saw what you did on January 3rd is because it's very accessible. It's right next to the ocean. We know the role that maritime, the British Navy empires have taught us the role of the importance of a big navy and being able to command and influence powers across the world. And Iran is very much not an easily accessible country. The terrain is horrid. The maritime access is pretty limited. You've got a failed state on your eastern border. Northern border is possibly a consideration, but then you've got a mountain range. To the left, it's pretty arid and the desert outlook. Point being is that if you want to conduct a conventional military ground assault, it's not easy to do. And no amount of airstrikes or indirect engagement is going to be enough to topple a regime, at least in a quick way. So this is a slow burning effort by, I don't know, the US or others to try to force the regime out, or to force reform and more moderate adoption of policies, or whatever it is. But as we see time and again, it never really materializes, and ultimately it just comes back to hurting the people most, which is the Iranian, those protesting. Anyway, that's just a bit of my random thinking. Sirap, are you back with us? Do you have any updates, any news?
No, I know you guys covered it already. I mean, the NOTAM has expired. I mean, news-wise, we're kind of in a lull right now. I'm not seeing anything major breaking in. I mean, again, possibly some protests tonight in Iraq, Iran, and I think a lot of it is one of these situations where this might have been a night where the Iranian threat perception was extremely high. They probably maybe had some indications from intelligence or some reporting, but they believed that maybe a strike was going to happen tonight. It didn't pan out. Again, not saying it's not. Again, anything is still possible, but it definitely has dropped down. And with the NOTAM reissued, we should be good to go. But again, I don't think a NOTAM wasn't even issued after the assassination of General Soleimani. So, again, the NOTAM is an indicator, but
that's fair. No, that is fair. I am surprised. I did actually think we were going to see something. But yeah, I'm surprised nothing happened. But there you go. I don't know. Do you think we could still see something?
I mean, I don't know if tonight. It could be. Look, this is President Donald Trump. Apparently, like, the Maduro operation was supposed to happen in Christmas, but it got delayed because they prioritized Nigeria.
Yeah,
and weather,
and weather, Christian strike on
and weather.
Yeah,
and weather. Well, it was the Nigeria.
The last 3 days were the weather, though.
The last 3 days, Christmas was supposed to be Maduro, but they decided to prioritize Nigeria, and then there was weather that pushed it all the way to January 3rd, and then that's when the mission was a go. And they got so again. I mean, look, there's a million different things that are going on. Can it happen still tonight? Absolutely. Can it happen during the middle of the day? Sure. Why not? Why can't it happen? Like, it can happen in any moment. Clearly, what I've been trying to say to people is that you try to look for indicators, right? And those indicators frame understandings of tensions rising and when strikes are happening specifically and we have to be very cognizant, people, that when we're having these conversations, we're doing it within the domain of unclassified information was publicly available. So obviously, I can tell you right now, there's a lot of things that when people are looking, and maybe this is something that the Iranians have with their intelligence capabilities, within their threat perception, they thought something indicated, hey, maybe an operation is going, we're going to raise our threat alert status because of it. And the United States would do the same. Now, what can we track in the open domain, in the publicly available, to see if something is happening or maybe not imminent, but something is very likely? Again, airspace closures is a key indication. Specifically when a host nation does it and indicates, hey, we're shutting down, that's a big deal, right? Closing of embassies, like we saw the UK pulling out of Iran and pulling out the ambassadors. The travel alerts across, we saw the United States, UK, Spain, Poland. I mean, I think every European Union country issued a travel alert related to Iran. Followed with the U.S. Pulling out of U.S. military forces from Qatar. We saw pulling out of forces out of Qatar and the tankers getting removed. Right? These are the indicators that shows, okay, this isn't normal and tensions are rising, and it could be. But again, it could mean a strike is imminent, or it could mean a strike happens a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, or never happens, and then there's a negotiation breakthrough, and we go back to normal. So those are the types of things that we're all looking for, and that's what we're trying to do. But indicators is not definitive proof. It's just things that you tick off to say, okay. And again, Piotr, as my example before, though, when General Soleimani was killed, there was no NOTAMs. It just happened.
Yeah,
So
but hold on, Sitrep, that was in Iraq, though, so there wouldn't be a reason for that, right?
Right, but but even in Iraq has a very important airspace. Right?
Yeah, but I'm saying that Iran wouldn't have a NOTAM in Iran over an attack in Iraq, right? It was a targeted attack. They knew nothing else was coming down the pipe.
I mean, but again, what I'm saying, but for example, Yehuda, let me put another example. The United States issued a NOTAM for Venezuelan airspace, but basically for a couple of weeks. But when January 3rd happened, there wasn't an FAA notice saying shutting down the airport. Now, again, it can't happen. It can't. You're just ticking off indicators. And in the public domain, I mean, Yehuda, I think you and I both know each other's background. If we're talking about in classified settings in the U.S. and Canada and NATO countries, obviously our indicators list is much more substantive and much more things that there's a lot of things we can track and say, okay, we have an understanding. When we're talking about public domains, and it's specifically related to militaries who train in trying to maintain OPSEC and deception, it's a lot harder. So you have to rely on a small list of things to have a better understanding. And that's the limitation and constraint. Piotr, we talked about this yesterday about, the constraints about OSINT. We talked jokingly about the pizza thing, right?
Oh, I saw another one of those earlier, actually. No, I saw at least 4 indications, and I looked at it completely differently since, every 20 minutes there was a surge in pizza demand. Well, okay, that just looks like a bit of a psyop at this point. I'm questioning everything.
It could have been an exercise at the Pentagon. It doesn't mean it had to be something.
And that's the thing I would tell. If you want to, if first of all, never use pizza as an indicator. Never use pizza.
Well, but with or without pineapple.
And if you're going to use it, which again you should never, but if you're going to do it, I don't know why people are focusing on the Pentagon. Focus on MacDill Air Force Base because that's where CENTCOM is located. U.S. Central Command is based out of Tampa, Florida, in MacDill Air Base. Look at the pizza. If you're going to use it, which you shouldn't, use that. And then the other ones you should look at is in Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina because that's where U.S. Army Central or 3rd Army and U.S. Air Force Central is based out of. Guess who would control this fight? It's not the Pentagon. The Pentagon doesn't control this fight. I don't know where people get this idea that it's like the basement of the Pentagon, like if this was Call of Duty Black Ops when you're meeting Kennedy. That's not how this is done. No, it's CENTCOM and then the Service Component Commands, which are U.S. Army Central Command, which is in Shaw, U.S. Air Force Central Command, which is in Shaw, and then they also have a forward deployed element, and then U.S. NAVCENT, which is headquarters in Bahrain. Like those are the commands you want to look at. Those are the people who are controlling the fight, not the Pentagon.
What you should tell them is it's a warning, not an indicator. So in other words, a NOTAM could be a warning. Wow, that's interesting. As you said, the U.S., they didn't telegraph everything. They had a NOTAM for 2 weeks. So they're not going to telegraph their exact, but they also don't want a civilian airliner shot down, which would be super bad. These are the reasons why things are done. And you have to give yourself a buffer when you're planning an operation like that. And that's exactly what the U.S. did. So I agree with you there, Sitrep.
Okay.
No, that's right.
No, I was going to say actually to that yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about OSINT and just the importance of actually questioning anything you hear. A lot of it can be speculation. A lot of it can just be what we feel like. It's like saying sort of my truths. Well, okay, your truths are all well and good, but if it's not actually based on maths or data, it's kind of irrelevant. But I think Fahad, you've got your hand raised again. So did you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think over the past couple hours we've seen the fact that the foreign minister from the regime was interviewed by Fox News, in which he said that there are no planned executions. And